So last week on the Triumph build, we stripped down the frame, we repainted it all, we found some original police paint under there, we re-greased the swing arm. Now we've got a blank canvas from which we can start building the motorcycle that I want. Now it's not going to go anywhere without some suspension, so today we're going to have a look at getting that on there, because the stuff this came with was, well, frightening. So if you remember from the first episode where I showed you the photos of the bike when I bought it, it had no rear shocks on it, and that was because the subframe was all bent over to one side from an accident. Now that's repaired and that's straight, we need to start thinking about putting some shocks onto there. And I have come up trumps in the fact that I've managed to get some new old stock Girlings. Now Girlings were the ones to have back in the day, and these are genuine examples. And they're going to fit the ticket pretty well. They are standard length, so not raised up at the moment. I might do that at a later date. I might update to Hagon shocks, something like that. But for now, we want to get the shocks on there into our nice straight frame. Now they do have specific bolts for this use, because there is no thread where the shock eyes actually sit. These came from Ace Classics, very reasonably priced, I might add. Now this isn't a sponsored thing, I just think they're a great source of parts. So let's get those Girling shocks bolted onto the back, and then we can start having a little think about what's going to go on the front. So we've now got Girling shocks bolted onto the back, and that's pivoting nicely. They should do the trick quite well. Now the top bolts for those shock mounts are slightly longer than you might imagine they need to be, but actually a mudguard brace goes across there, so that will probably come in handy later on. Now moving on to the front, we've got to get some forks on there. Now right at the beginning of this series, when I explained to you how the bike was when I bought it, there were some major problems with our forks. Now a lot of BSA and Triumph stuff is interchangeable, but it's not as simple as it all being interchangeable. There are some major flaws with the front end that came on this. Now you can see here I've got the upper and the lower of the forks that came on the bike. Now the upper is BSA with the pullback risers, and it's distastefully had some Japanese mounts put on top of there. That's not necessarily a problem in comparison to what I'm about to show you. Now, when you set up forks, you want them to be straight through both crowns. These do not line up, so if you were to put the forks into the top crown, they wouldn't line up with the holes in the bottom crown. How do you get around that? Well, you get a new lower crown. This guy didn't. What he decided to do was actually cut a portion of our crown, a point that needs to be strong. He's gone ahead and cut it just so that he could ram those fork tubes through there and then wang them up pretty tight. That is just not going to do. In fact, I wouldn't even be happy with welding them up, and if that's not bad enough, we move on to the fork legs. They're pretty crusty, and really that puts me at the point where I start thinking I could do with a new front end. Now Triumph front ends are in quite high demand, and they're not easily come by. If you do come by them, they can be quite expensive, and I can't believe the luck I've had with finding parts and building this. Believe it or not, I went to the pub, my local motorcycle club, and I met a man called John. Now John is going to feature in this project a little bit because a few parts have come from him, and I think we should give him a name. John from the pub? John of the pub. I think we should call him John of the pub. Well, John of the pub and I got talking, and he said, I've actually got a Triumph front end in my shed. Why don't you come round and have a look at it? So off to John's I went, and he actually had a few bits and bobs that I could use, but most importantly, he had that front end. Now, the front end I've got on the 500 Triumph is the internally sprung earlier forks, and they're fine for that, but I don't really want a bike that's going to be too similar, so it's quite important to me to get the externally sprung ones. They are a better fork as well, in my opinion. So, when John turned up with these, and all the fittings to go with them, I was pretty impressed. Now, these are in remarkable condition. I've spent some time cleaning them up, and cleaning up the yokes as well. They had a bit of lacquer and some crust on them, but they actually bear a lot of original paint. I've also stripped these as well, and the internals, I mean, it would be rude to replace anything, quite frankly. So these are going to go on as they are. But before we can do that, we need to sort out some head bearings. So I believe in the last video, I actually refitted the cups that the bike came with because they looked fine to go back in. I've since decided to go for taper roller bearings. So they're only about £35 for a set. So that seems worth doing. So we'll have to bash in the cups for the taper roller bearings, and also remove the lower race on the forks there. You can see that someone's had a real go at that with the chisel, I suppose, to try and get it off. Hopefully that wasn't to put it on there. We're going to try and heat it up and see if we can get it to drop it off. If that fails, we'll have to come up with another method. So with our fork crowns, or our yokes, whatever you want to call them, now attached, it's time to attach the lowers of the fork and the stanchion. I've just fitted the gaiters. I've had to cable tie them for now because the parcel with the correct clips hasn't turned up. So we will pop those on, and then we can fill them with oil, check they're pulled through to the tapers, and also check the headstock bearings are tensioned correctly. So, forks are now fitted, and they're also filled with the right capacity of oil, which is great. It means we'll have some damping, and things are looking pretty good. I'm getting pretty excited now. I think what we should do next is pop a pair of handlebars on there, because when we get this onto some wheels, it'd be nice if we could move it around a little bit. So handlebars wise, you may well see these as familiar, and that is because they were originally on my 500 Triumph. Before that, they actually came on my very first bike. They were off of my 125. So Me and these bars have a bit of a history. They've got to go on there. Now, levers wise, we've just got the levers that came on the bike. They have seen better days, but they will do the job. And then coming over to the throttle, this is actually one of my favourite parts that I've got so far. And this was actually gifted to me from Rick. So big thanks to Rick for that. But this is a Tomaselli quarter turn quick action throttle, which is right up my street. I'm kind of into those little bits and bobs that make this build a little bit fancier, and this is one of them. I think it's a very nicely made item, so I'm looking forward to getting those on there. This is going to be the first bit that kind of differentiates this from putting back together a stock Triumph. Right, so handlebars are attached, and that already gives it that kind of nice custom off-roady sort of look that I think we're probably going to aim for. I'm really pleased to kind of see this coming together now. Won't be long before we can get it up and rolling and start thinking about dropping an engine in there at some point. So this is really cool. So from here on out, we've got our basis. This is our canvas, and now we can start bolting on bits and let this bike kind of take form. Super exciting stuff. So I think next week we're going to get this up and rolling. We're going to get some wheels on there, and then we can start looking at adding some bits and pieces. So that's going to do us for today. A big thank you to you guys. I hope you're enjoying following along with this project, and you're looking forward to next week's video. If you have enjoyed the video, please think about giving it a little thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed and you want to see this thing get built, please subscribe. I really appreciate your time, and I will see you again in the next episode.